I decided I'm going to save one of my points of complaint about the opening scene of the season until we talk about John the Baptist. But the other thing that I didn't quite like about it is when John and Mary are talking, he's talking about, John is like, I was in his inmost circle, and Mary's like,
he says
he loved me.
He says that he loved me, and
and Mary says he loved all of you, but like,
you just feel the need to talk about it more.
That's right. And I don't like that. Again, it's one of those things where as a Catholic, it's like everybody knows that like John was very self-effacing in the writing of his gospel. And he doesn't name himself for that reason. He calls himself the disciple Jesus loved, probably more out of self-effacement than out of, bragging. And also to allow us, I think that's part of the tradition, is to allow us to put ourselves in his place, so I wasn't happy with that.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there's that much more that needs to be said about it. The other thing that I wasn't happy about with John and Mary is that it's set up that he's kind of doing these interviews and taking these first notes for the gospel almost as a way of distracting himself from processing his grief about his brother's martyrdom. And Mary is almost like, why are you doing this? You need to be mourning your brother's death. And I think it ends up in the right place because she ends up getting him to the place to write those inspired first lines. So, but I just don't think it's necessary to kind of complicate it any more than that.
Yeah.
And I just don't like that would be connected with the beginning of the composition of his gospel, even though clearly they regard the gospel text itself as inspired and everything. And, they get serious once he starts writing those lines, So I'm not quite happy with that. That's one of the little characterizations that I don't like.
I can't remember if we mentioned this I should have gone back and listened to our a discussion of the first season, but if I recall correctly, we may have mentioned this, this like taking scandal at the notion that God has preference. I think that this is something that for a lot of Christians is a scandalous notion that God might have preference in his love, right? Like Mary saying, well, he loved you all, as if that's sort of mutually exclusive with Jesus loving him especially, right? It's not true. Like, God loves us infinitely, all, and yet there's still this demonstrable phenomenon of preference.
Yeah.
Right? And Mary knows that more than anyone, right? Mary, the Immaculate,
yes.
right? So
Gargou Lagrange says that nobody or he conveys this. I got this via him from Aquinas, but that I think he says Aquinas says nobody would be better than anyone else had not God loved him more.
Yeah,
and that's not a call for us to be making those judgments,
right?
But the fact of the matter is that. I mean, there's a mystery. There's a great mystery here. Yeah. There's all sorts of errors you could fall into.
But for a series that calls itself The Chosen, right? Like, this really shouldn't be a problem.
Right.
The idea that God might choose to preference somebody over another, and there's just kind of like a false modesty, I think, that's kind of behind that. Because Mary would know that she's, from this day forward, all generations will call me blessed, So I think that's enough said about that. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Brother Josh?
No, I think those are excellent points. Those are definitely sort of weaknesses in that initial scene. You can kind of expand that idea of God's preference to what I think a lot of apologists call the scandal of particularity, the fact that people find it offensive that God chose a specific people and marked them out as his own and revealed himself to them, and not just, willy-nilly to everyone in the same way.